The Nexus station floated in the void between three star systems like a massive metal flower, its petals reaching out toward distant suns. Commander Marcus Chen stood at the observation deck of the human transport vessel, Perseverance, watching the alien megastructure grow larger as they approached. The station was home to the Galactic Trade Consortium, where representatives from dozens of species gathered to conduct business, negotiate treaties, and generally pretend they all got along. Marcus adjusted the collar of his crisp military uniform, the blue and silver insignia of Earth's Stellar Defense Corps catching the light from the viewport. He was here on a simple mission: negotiate new trade agreements for rare Earth minerals that humanity desperately needed for their expanding fleet. Simple in theory. In practice, dealing with alien bureaucrats was like trying to herd cats that could breathe poison gas and had 6 arms each. "First time at the Nexus, Commander?" asked Captain Sarah Mitchell, the Perseverance's commanding officer. She was a veteran of the Centauri campaigns, with graying hair and eyes that had seen too much combat. "Yes, ma'am. I've read the briefings, but seeing it in person is something else entirely." Marcus gestured toward the massive structure ahead of them. Ships of every conceivable design swarmed around it like insects around a hive. He could see the elegant flowing curves of Zalani vessels, the blocky utilitarian craft of the Korgan Empire, and dozens of other designs that defied easy description. "Word of advice," Captain Mitchell said, her voice dropping to a more serious tone. "Don't let them get under your skin. Humans are still the new kids on the galactic block. Most of these species have been dealing with each other for thousands of years. To them, we're barely out of our caves." Marcus nodded, but inside he felt a familiar fire burning. He'd heard variations of this same warning his entire career. "Don't rock the boat. Don't make waves. Remember that we're guests in their galaxy." But Marcus had also read the classified reports about human performance in recent conflicts. Earth's forces consistently outperformed predictions, often by significant margins. There was something about human adaptability, creativity, and sheer stubborn determination that seemed to catch other species off guard. The docking procedure took nearly an hour. The Nexus operated on what they called Standard Galactic Time, which was apparently an average of the natural cycles of the founding member species. To humans, it felt arbitrary and unnecessarily complicated. But then again, most things about galactic civilization felt that way. Marcus gathered his equipment and made his way to the airlock. His delegation consisted of himself, 2 trade specialists, and a cultural attaché whose job was to make sure they didn't accidentally insult anyone's religious beliefs or dietary restrictions. It was a small team by galactic standards, but Earth couldn't afford to send large delegations to every trade negotiation. The moment Marcus stepped into the station proper, he was hit by a wave of sensory overload. The air was thick with the smell of dozens of different atmospheres being recycled and mixed. The lighting was a compromise between the preferences of various species, resulting in an oddly purple-tinted illumination that made everything look slightly unreal. And the noise, the cacophony of different languages, some spoken, some whistled, some apparently communicated through electromagnetic pulses, was overwhelming. "Commander Chen?" A voice spoke in heavily accented Standard Galactic. Marcus turned to see a Korgan approaching him. The alien was roughly humanoid, but stood nearly 8 feet tall and was covered in what looked like natural armor plating. His face was a series of sharp angles and ridges, and his eyes glowed with a faint amber light. "That's correct. You must be Trade Coordinator Vaxon." Marcus extended his hand in the human gesture of greeting, then caught himself and performed the Korgan salute instead, a sharp tap to the center of his chest, followed by an open palm gesture. The Korgan's mandibles clicked in what Marcus hoped was amusement. "Your cultural preparation is adequate, human. I am indeed Vaxon of the Third Commercial House. I will be overseeing your petition for mineral rights." Petition. Marcus noted the word choice, not negotiation, not discussion, petition, as if humanity was asking for a favor rather than offering a mutually beneficial trade agreement. I appreciate your time, Coordinator. Earth is prepared to offer very favorable terms for long-term agreements. Yes, I have reviewed your proposals. Vaxon gestured for Marcus to follow him through the crowded corridors of the station. Quite ambitious for such a young species. Tell me, Commander, how long has your species been capable of faster-than-light travel? Approximately 47 years, Marcus replied, knowing full well that Vaxon already knew the answer. 47 years, Vaxon repeated, his voice carrying clearly over the ambient noise. Several nearby aliens turned to look at them, and Marcus could hear whispers in languages he didn't recognize. Most impressive. The Korgans required nearly 3 centuries to develop reliable FTL technology after achieving spaceflight. They passed a group of Zalani merchants, their translucent skin shifting colors in patterns that Marcus had learned indicated either amusement or disdain. One of them spoke in Standard, apparently not caring whether Marcus understood. The humans always seemed to be in such a hurry. Perhaps if they learned patience, they might last longer than their predecessors. Marcus felt his jaw tighten, but he kept his expression neutral. The Zalani were referring to the Terrans, a species that had attempted rapid expansion about 2,000 years ago and had subsequently collapsed when they overextended their resources. It was apparently a popular comparison when discussing humanity. The Zalani raise an interesting point, Vaxon continued as they walked. Your species has indeed achieved remarkable technological advancement in a short time, but speed of development and sustainability are quite different things. They entered a lift that moved both vertically and horizontally through the station's complex internal structure. Marcus watched through the transparent walls as they passed through different sections designed for different atmospheric requirements. In one, he could see aquatic species floating in massive tanks. In another, silicon-based life forms moved through chambers filled with superheated gases. This is the consortium's pride, Vaxon explained, following Marcus's gaze. Peaceful cooperation between hundreds of species, each contributing their unique strengths to the greater galactic community. It has taken millennia to achieve this level of harmony. Very impressive, Marcus agreed. Earth hopes to contribute to that harmony. Indeed, though I must ask, what exactly does humanity bring to this ancient partnership? Your technology is derivative of existing designs. Your industrial capacity is modest. Your military... Vaxon paused, his mandibles clicking again. Well, your military experience consists primarily of conflicts with yourselves, does it not? They had reached their destination, a vast chamber lined with conference rooms of various sizes and environmental configurations. Through the transparent walls, Marcus could see dozens of meetings in progress. The scale of galactic commerce was staggering. Humans bring innovation, adaptability, and determination, Marcus replied carefully. We may be new to the galactic community, but we learn quickly. Ah, yes, the famous human adaptability. A new voice joined the conversation. Marcus turned to see a Zalani approaching them, her skin patterns shifting to what he now recognized as patronizing amusement. I am Trade Minister Shalaxa. I have had the pleasure of reviewing your species' proposals. Honored to meet you, Minister, Marcus said, performing the Zalani greeting, a complex hand gesture that took him several seconds to complete. How earnest, Shalaxa said, her patterns shifting to something that might have been condescension. Tell me, Commander, are you familiar with the concept of galactic standard practices? I've studied them extensively. Wonderful. Then you understand that trade agreements of the scope you're proposing typically require decades of preliminary negotiations, cultural exchange programs, and gradual integration protocols. Marcus felt his patience beginning to fray. With respect, Minister, the mineral deposits Earth is offering access to are extremely valuable. We're not asking for charity. We're offering a mutually beneficial arrangement. Mutually beneficial, Shalaxa repeated, her skin now cycling through patterns that Marcus was beginning to suspect indicated mockery. How refreshingly direct. Most young species begin with such optimism. Vaxon gestured them toward a conference room designed for oxygen-breathing species. Perhaps we should begin the preliminary discussions, though I should mention that the Trade Consortium has recently implemented new protocols for evaluating proposals from developing civilizations. Developing civilizations? Marcus asked as they settled around a conference table that was clearly designed for beings much larger than humans. A new classification system, Shalaxa explained, her patterns now settled into what seemed to be smug satisfaction. Species are evaluated based on various criteria: technological sophistication, cultural stability, economic capacity, and military capability. It helps us determine appropriate levels of integration. Marcus felt a cold knot forming in his stomach. And humanity's classification? Provisional status, Vaxon said, consulting a holographic display. Your species shows promise, but significant concerns remain about long-term viability. The evaluation committee was particularly concerned about human tendency toward conflict and resource overconsumption. I see. Marcus kept his voice level, though inside he was beginning to understand exactly what kind of negotiation this was going to be, and what would be required to improve our classification. Time, primarily, Shalaxa said. Perhaps a few centuries of consistent peaceful development, demonstration of sustainable resource management, cultural maturation. A few centuries, Marcus repeated. The consortium takes a long view, Vaxon explained. We have learned through painful experience that rapid integration of unstable species can be disruptive to galactic peace. Better to proceed cautiously. Marcus looked around the conference room, noting the artwork on the walls depicting various historical moments in galactic civilization. All of it seemed to emphasize the wisdom and patience of the elder species, the careful deliberation that had built their peaceful society. In the meantime, Shalaxa continued, the consortium would be willing to consider limited agreements, perhaps a small quantity of basic metals in exchange for certain considerations. What kind of considerations? Access to human cultural products, for instance. Your entertainment media has gained some popularity among certain demographics. Also, the consortium has expressed interest in studying human psychological adaptability. There are research institutions that would pay handsomely for the opportunity to better understand your species' unique traits. Marcus felt his anger rising. They wanted to trade scraps for the privilege of studying humans like laboratory specimens. And the mineral rights we proposed? Far beyond the scope appropriate for a species of provisional status, Vaxon said dismissively. Perhaps in a few decades, when humanity has demonstrated greater stability. I understand your position, Marcus said slowly. May I have some time to consult with my team? Of course, Shalaxa said, her patterns shifting to what looked like polite dismissal. The consortium has learned that hasty decisions benefit no one. Take all the time you need to consider our generous offer. As they left the conference room, Marcus could hear other conversations from nearby meetings. A Draxian delegate was negotiating massive industrial contracts. A Heptarch representative was discussing military cooperation agreements. The scale of the deals being made around them was enormous, while humanity was being offered table scraps. Marcus made his way back to the human quarters assigned to their delegation, his mind racing. The cultural attaché, Dr. Elena Vasquez, was waiting with the trade specialists. How did it go? She asked, though his expression probably gave her the answer. About as well as you'd expect, Marcus said grimly. They want to treat us like a charity case. Limited trades for basic materials, in exchange for letting them study us like exotic animals. That's outrageous, said trade specialist Roberts. "The mineral surveys clearly show that Earth's asteroid belt alone contains more rare Earth elements than most systems see in a millennium." "They don't care," Marcus replied. "We're provisional status. Too young, too unstable, too aggressive. They want us to spend a few centuries proving we deserve to sit at the adults' table." Dr. Vasquez frowned. "There might be other approaches. The consortium isn't the only game in the galaxy. There are independent systems, smaller trade networks, all of which follow consortium guidelines when it comes to humanity," Marcus said. "I did my homework. The big players set the standards and everyone else falls in line." He walked to the viewport in their quarters, looking out at the massive station around them. Thousands of beings going about their business, making deals worth billions of credits, shaping the future of galactic civilization, and humanity was being patted on the head and told to come back in a few hundred years. "There's something else," Roberts said quietly. "I've been monitoring local communications. There's been chatter about humanity among some of the minor delegations, not all of it friendly." "What kind of chatter?" "Apparently there's a betting pool about how long human civilization will last. The smart money is on internal collapse within 50 years. Some of the more aggressive species are apparently making contingency plans for our territories." Marcus felt his hands clench into fists. "Contingency plans?" "Nothing official, of course, but there's a lot of discussion about what to do with our systems when we inevitably self-destruct. Very civilized, very reasonable discussion about how to responsibly manage human space for the good of the galaxy." "They're already dividing us up," Dr. Vasquez said, her voice hollow with disbelief. "Like we're already dead." Marcus turned back to the viewport, watching the elegant alien ships moving through the void around the station. Each one represented a civilization that considered itself superior to humanity. Older, wiser, more evolved. They looked at humans and saw primitive animals playing with technology they didn't understand. "Commander," Roberts said carefully, "what are your orders? Do we try to negotiate with their terms, or do we return to Earth and report the situation?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, watching a Korgan dreadnought drift past the station. It was a beautiful ship, graceful despite its size, bristling with weapons that could probably glass a planet. The Korgans were one of the more militaristic species in the consortium, but even they followed the rules, maintained the peace, respected the ancient protocols. "Neither," Marcus said finally. "Sir, we're going to show them exactly what humans are capable of." Marcus turned back to his team, and something in his expression made them all step back slightly. "They want to see how long human civilization lasts? They want to study human adaptability? They think we're too aggressive, too unstable?" "Commander, what are you thinking?" Dr. Vasquez asked nervously. "I'm thinking that they're about to learn why you don't corner a predator." Marcus walked to the communications console and began entering commands. "Roberts, I want you to start documenting every insult, every dismissive comment, every species that's betting against us. Vasquez, I need cultural profiles on all the major players. Weaknesses, blind spots, anything we can use." "Use for what?" Roberts asked. Marcus smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. "For showing the galaxy that humans don't beg for scraps. We take what we deserve." Outside the viewport, the alien ships continued their peaceful dance around the massive station, unaware that they had just made a terrible mistake. They had underestimated humanity once too often, dismissed them as insignificant one too many times. They wanted to see human aggression and adaptability. Marcus Chen was about to give them a demonstration they would never forget. Marcus spent the next 3 days watching and learning. He attended every public session he could access, observed the casual interactions between species, and slowly began to understand the real power structure of galactic civilization. The Trade Consortium was just the visible face of something much more complex. The real decisions weren't made in the formal conference rooms. They happened in private dining establishments, exclusive social clubs, and carefully orchestrated cultural events. Humanity wasn't just excluded from the trade negotiations. They were excluded from the entire social ecosystem that drove galactic politics. "Commander, you need to see this," Dr. Vasquez said, entering their quarters with a grim expression. She activated a holographic display showing what appeared to be a scientific journal. "It's from the Zalani Institute for Xenobiological Studies." Marcus read the title with growing disbelief. "Preliminary Analysis of Homo sapiens Aggression Patterns, Implications for Galactic Security." Below it was a subtitle that made his blood boil. "A Case Study in Evolutionary Dead Ends." "They're publishing academic papers about us," Vasquez continued. "This one concludes that human civilization is inherently unstable due to what they call maladaptive competitive instincts. They're recommending that the consortium implement containment protocols to prevent human expansion from destabilizing neighboring systems." "Containment protocols?" Marcus asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "Economic isolation, technological restrictions, and—" Vasquez swallowed hard. "Military intervention if necessary to prevent human territorial expansion beyond current boundaries." Roberts looked up from his own research terminal. "It gets worse, Commander. I've been tracking the betting pools. The odds have shifted dramatically in the past 2 days. Someone with deep pockets has been placing enormous bets on human civilization collapsing within the next 10 years. Who? That's the interesting part. The credits are coming from a consortium of military contractors from various species, companies that specialize in post-conflict resource extraction and territorial management." Marcus felt pieces clicking into place. "They're not just betting on our collapse, they're planning to cause it." "It would make sense," Dr. Vasquez said reluctantly. "If human space becomes unstable, someone has to step in to maintain order. And if that someone happens to be well-positioned to profit from managing human resources and territory—" Marcus walked to the viewport, staring out at the bustling traffic around the station. Every ship out there represented a civilization that considered humans to be a temporary inconvenience. They weren't just dismissing humanity, they were actively planning its destruction. "Commander," Roberts said carefully, "I think we should report this to Earth immediately. This is way beyond trade negotiations. This is a potential threat to human survival." "No," Marcus said without turning around. "Earth's response would be to try diplomatic solutions. File protests, request hearings, appeal to consortium justice. And while we're jumping through their bureaucratic hoops, they'll implement their containment protocols." "Then what do you suggest?" Marcus turned back to his team, and they could see that something fundamental had changed in his expression. The diplomatic mask was gone, replaced by something cold and predatory. "I suggest we remind the galaxy why apex predators don't go extinct quietly." That evening, Marcus attended a social gathering in one of the station's entertainment districts. It was an informal mixer for junior trade representatives, the kind of event designed to facilitate casual networking, the perfect place for a human commander to make some new friends. The venue was a multi-environment space designed to accommodate various species' preferences. Marcus found himself in the oxygen breather section, nursing a drink that tasted like battery acid mixed with fruit juice. Around him, conversations flowed in a dozen languages, most of which his translator implant handled adequately. "Commander Chen!" a familiar voice called out. Marcus turned to see Trade Coordinator Vaxon approaching with several other aliens in tow. "I was hoping you would attend. I wanted you to meet some colleagues." Marcus smiled politely as Vaxon introduced him to a Heptarch trade official, a Draxian industrial representative, and a Zalani military liaison. The group was clearly curious about the human delegation, though their interest felt more like examining an exotic specimen than genuine diplomatic engagement. "We were just discussing your species' unique approach to problem solving," said the Heptarch, whose name Marcus caught as something like Kexthan. Your tendency toward what you call thinking outside the box is quite fascinating from an analytical perspective. Thank you, Marcus replied. Humans do pride themselves on adaptability. Yes, though adaptability can be a double-edged sword, said the Draxian. We have observed that species with high adaptive capacity often lack the stability required for long-term galactic integration. The Zilani liaison, whose skin patterns Marcus was beginning to read as barely concealed contempt, gestured toward the larger gathering. The consortium has learned to value predictability. After all, chaos may produce short-term innovations, but order creates lasting prosperity. An interesting perspective, Marcus said, taking another sip of his terrible drink. Though I imagine even the most stable systems occasionally benefit from outside perspectives. Perhaps, Vaxon said, his mandibles clicking in what Marcus now recognized as condescension. Though such perspectives must be carefully managed, the young often mistake bold action for wisdom. The conversation continued in this vein for nearly an hour, with each alien representative taking subtle jabs at humanity while maintaining a facade of polite interest. Marcus played his part perfectly, asking earnest questions and accepting their patronizing explanations with apparent gratitude. You know, Kexthan said as the evening progressed and the alcohol loosened tongues, there's actually a fascinating study being conducted on human psychological patterns. The results suggest that your species' emotional volatility makes long-term planning extremely difficult. Really? Marcus asked, feigning interest. What kind of study? Observational analysis of human behavior patterns in various scenarios, the Zilani liaison explained. Your delegation's responses to our trade proposals, for instance, provide valuable data about human reaction to disappointment. Marcus felt his grip tighten on his glass. You mean this entire negotiation has been a psychological experiment? Not entirely, Vaxon said, apparently not noticing the edge in Marcus's voice. Though I must admit your species' reactions have been quite predictable. The initial optimism, followed by frustration when faced with realistic limitations, and now the gradual acceptance of your actual position in the galactic hierarchy. Fascinating, Marcus said, his voice perfectly level. And what do your studies predict about human behavior when we realize we've been deliberately manipulated? The group exchanged glances that were clearly meant to be subtle, but were obvious to anyone actually paying attention. Well, the Draxian said, with what might have been nervous laughter. We certainly hope such a situation never arises. The consortium values transparency in all its dealings. Of course, Marcus replied, finishing his drink. Though I imagine you have contingency plans, just in case humans don't react the way your studies predict. The consortium is always prepared for various scenarios, Kexthan said carefully. It's simply good governance. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. Good governance. I suppose that's one way to describe economic containment and military intervention protocols. The silence that followed was deafening. The group stared at Marcus with expressions ranging from surprise to alarm. I'm not sure what you mean, Vaxon said slowly. Oh, I think you know exactly what I mean, Marcus replied, setting down his empty glass. The Zilani research papers, the betting pools, the resource extraction contracts already being negotiated by military contractors. Very thorough planning. The Zilani liaison's skin patterns had shifted to what Marcus was certain indicated panic. Commander, I think there may be some misunderstanding. No misunderstanding at all, Marcus said pleasantly. You've made your position very clear. Humanity is a temporary inconvenience that you're planning to eliminate as efficiently as possible. You're just not used to the inconvenience being aware of the plan. He stood up from the small table where they'd been sitting, looking down at the group of aliens who were now clearly reconsidering their evening's entertainment. You want to study human psychology? You want to understand how we react to betrayal? Marcus smiled, and there was nothing pleasant about it. You're about to get a very thorough education. Commander Chen, Kexthon said nervously, perhaps we should discuss this in a more private setting. Privacy? Marcus laughed, the sound sharp enough to cut through the ambient noise of the gathering. You mean the way you privately decided humanity's fate? The way you privately planned our containment and destruction? Other conversations in the area were starting to die down as beings turned to watch the confrontation. Marcus could see various species watching with expressions of curiosity, concern, or barely concealed excitement. You made one critical error in your analysis, Marcus continued, his voice carrying clearly through the suddenly quiet venue. You assumed that humans would react to betrayal the same way as your stable, predictable species. You thought we'd file protests, request hearings, maybe sulk back to our little corner of space. Vaxon's amber eyes were glowing brighter now, which Marcus had learned indicated either anger or fear. Commander, you are creating a public disturbance. No, Marcus said, cutting him off. I'm creating a public education. You see, there's something about human psychology that apparently didn't make it into your studies. We don't just adapt to problems. We eliminate them. The Draxian had risen from his seat and was backing away from the table. Security should be notified. Of what? A trade representative having a conversation with colleagues? Marcus gestured to the crowd that had gathered. Unless, of course, you're concerned that other species might learn about your containment protocols. Might start wondering if they're next on the list. The reaction from the watching crowd was immediate and electric. Murmurs in dozens of languages rippled through the gathering as species that had considered themselves safe in consortium protection suddenly realized they might not be. The consortium has no such protocols, the Zalani liaison said desperately, her skin patterns cycling through colors Marcus couldn't even identify. These are baseless accusations. Really? Marcus pulled out a small device and activated it, projecting holographic displays of documents, betting records, and research papers. Would you care to explain these to our audience? The evidence was devastating. Research papers discussing human containment, military contracts for post-collapse territorial management, economic analysis of human resources under alien administration. It was all there, documented in the perpetrator's own words. The crowd's murmur had become a roar. Marcus could see beings from dozens of species staring at the evidence, many of them clearly realizing that if the consortium could plan something like this for humanity, no species was truly safe. This is classified information, Kexthon stammered. How did you obtain classified documents from supposedly secure consortium systems? Marcus asked, his smile becoming genuinely predatory. You wanted to study human adaptability. Consider this a field demonstration. Security forces were finally pushing through the crowd, but Marcus wasn't done. He raised his voice, ensuring everyone in the venue could hear him clearly. Citizens of the galaxy, you've just witnessed something historic. You've seen proof that the consortium doesn't just manage galactic affairs, it eliminates inconvenient species. Today it's humanity. Tomorrow it might be any of you who show too much independence, too much growth, too much potential. The security forces reached their table, but the damage was already done. The evidence was being transmitted across the station's networks, shared through personal communicators, discussed in hushed voices as the crowd dispersed. Commander Chen, the lead security officer said, you'll need to come with us. Of course, Marcus said pleasantly. Though I should mention that this entire conversation has been transmitted in real time to Earth, as well as to several independent news networks throughout the galaxy. He looked back at the group of aliens who had so casually discussed humanity's destruction over drinks and appetizers. You wanted to see human psychology under stress? You wanted to study how we adapt to impossible situations? Marcus's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than his earlier shouts. Congratulations! Your experiment is about to begin." As the security forces led him away, Marcus could hear the chaos erupting throughout the venue. Accusations, denials, demands for explanations. The careful order of galactic civilization was beginning to crack, and through those cracks, something dangerous was emerging. The galaxy had mocked the lone human, dismissed his species as primitive and unstable. They had made their plans, placed their bets, and prepared to divide up human space like vultures picking over a corpse. They were about to learn that vultures should be more careful about what they choose to hunt, because sometimes the prey fights back, and sometimes the prey wins. The Consortium Detention Facility was a marvel of galactic engineering, designed to hold beings from hundreds of different species safely and securely. Each cell was customized for its occupants' environmental needs, with force fields calibrated to contain everything from energy beings to creatures that could phase through matter. The designers had thought of everything. Everything except the possibility that their prisoner might not want to escape immediately. Marcus sat calmly in his cell, reviewing data on a small device that his captors had somehow failed to find during their search. To be fair, they had been looking for weapons and communication equipment, not a quantum storage drive the size of a grain of rice that had been surgically implanted under his skin 3 years ago. Earth's intelligence services had learned to be thorough in their preparations. The device contained everything: detailed profiles of every species represented in the consortium, military capabilities, economic vulnerabilities, political structures, and most importantly, the personal information of every individual who had participated in the conspiracy against humanity. Names, locations, families, assets, weaknesses. Marcus had spent the past 6 hours organizing the data into target priorities. The galaxy was about to learn that humans didn't just think outside the box. They burned the box down and used the ashes as fertilizer for something better. His contemplation was interrupted by the arrival of Consortium Security Chief Thyrak, a Korgan who looked like he'd been carved from black stone and powered by barely contained violence. Despite his intimidating appearance, Thyrak was known for his adherence to proper procedures and protocols. "Commander Chen," Thyrak said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through the force field. "You have caused considerable disruption to station operations." "Have I?" Marcus asked mildly. "I thought I was just having a conversation with colleagues." "A conversation that has resulted in 17 formal diplomatic protests, 43 requests for immediate investigation of consortium policies, and what I can only describe as a panic among several member species." Thyrak's amber eyes studied Marcus with what might have been professional respect. "Quite impressive for one human in one evening." "Thank you. I pride myself on efficiency." Thyrak moved closer to the force field, his massive form casting shadows across the cell. "The evidence you presented has been analyzed. Some of it appears to be authentic, though we are still investigating how you obtained classified documents." "Trade secret," Marcus replied with a slight smile. "Indeed. The Consortium Council has decided that this situation requires careful handling. You will be transferred to a secure facility on Korgan Prime for extended interrogation and evaluation." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "When?" "Transport departs in 4 hours. I felt you deserved advance notice, as a courtesy between military professionals." Thyrak paused. "Though I should warn you that escape from a Korgan maximum security facility has never been successfully accomplished." "I appreciate the warning," Marcus said, "though I should mention that you're operating under a fundamental misunderstanding." "What misunderstanding?" Marcus stood up and moved closer to the force field, looking directly into Thyrak's glowing eyes. "You think I'm your prisoner." Before Thyrak could respond, the lights went out. Emergency illumination kicked in immediately, bathing everything in a red glow. But in that brief moment of darkness, everything changed. Marcus's cell force field flickered and died. Alarms began blaring throughout the facility. And from somewhere in the distance came the unmistakable sound of explosions. Thirax spun around, reaching for his weapon, but Marcus was already moving. The Korgan was fast, but humans had evolved as persistence hunters, and Marcus had spent years training for exactly this kind of situation. He slipped past Thirax's reaching arms and struck 3 precise points on the alien's armor with what looked like casual taps. The massive Korgan collapsed like a felled tree, paralyzed by disruption to his nervous system. The technique was something Earth's special forces had developed specifically for dealing with heavily armored alien physiology. "Apologies, Chief," Marcus said, relieving Thirax of his weapons and access codes. "But I have appointments to keep." The chaos in the detention facility was spreading rapidly. Marcus could hear other prisoners taking advantage of the system failures, but he had no time for mass liberation. He had work to do. He made his way through corridors that were becoming increasingly chaotic as security forces rushed to contain multiple emergencies. The attack on the station wasn't random. It was a carefully coordinated distraction that Marcus had arranged during his 6 hours of apparent passive waiting. His first target was Trade Minister Shalaxa's private quarters in the diplomatic section. The Zalani had been especially smug about humanity's prospects for containment. Time to adjust her perspective. The diplomatic quarters security was formidable under normal circumstances, but the current crisis had drawn most guards away to deal with more immediate threats. Marcus moved through the corridors like a ghost, using service passages and maintenance shafts that his implanted device had mapped from the station's own databases. Shalaxa's quarters were luxurious by any standard, decorated with artifacts from a dozen different civilizations. The minister herself was in the middle of an emergency communication with what appeared to be high-ranking consortium officials when Marcus entered through the ventilation system. "Absolutely critical that we contain this situation before it spreads to other systems. The humans' accusations are causing panic throughout the outer territories, and several species are demanding independent investigations." Her words cut off as she noticed the reflection in her communication screen. A human, standing behind her, wearing a stolen security uniform and holding what was clearly not a standard consortium weapon. "Minister Shalaxa," Marcus said pleasantly, "we need to talk." The Zalani spun around, her skin patterns cycling rapidly through what Marcus now recognized as extreme terror. "How did you? The security systems failed rather spectacularly, didn't they?" Marcus gestured for her to shut off the communication. "I'm afraid your colleagues will have to manage the crisis without you for a while. What do you want?" Shalaxa's voice was barely a whisper, and her skin had gone completely transparent except for frantically pulsing veins. "Information, cooperation, and a small demonstration of why underestimating humans is a career-limiting mistake." Marcus moved closer, noting how the alien instinctively backed away. "Let's start with the betting pools. I want names, amounts, and payout schedules." "I don't know what you're talking about." Marcus raised the weapon slightly. It wasn't pointed at her, but the implication was clear. "Minister, your skin patterns indicate that you're lying. Badly. Zalani biology makes you terrible poker players." The next 10 minutes were extremely educational. Shalaxa, faced with the choice between cooperation and whatever mysterious fate Marcus was implying, chose cooperation. The information she provided confirmed Marcus's worst suspicions. The conspiracy against humanity went far beyond simple economic manipulation. The plan was elegant in its cruelty. Economic containment would be followed by deliberate introduction of conflicts between human colonies, supplied and supported by anonymous arms dealers who happened to be consortium members. As human space destabilized, peacekeeping forces would intervene to protect alien interests. Within 20 years, humanity would exist only as a client species, their territory divided among more responsible civilizations. The irony, Marcus said as he finished copying data from Shalaxa's personal terminals, is that you actually succeeded in teaching us something valuable. You showed us exactly how galactic politics really works. Commander, please, whatever you're planning, consider the consequences. Actions against consortium members will only prove that humans are as violent and unstable as the research indicates. Marcus paused in his data collection, looking at the terrified alien with something that might have been pity. Minister, you still don't understand. We're not trying to prove we're civilized according to your standards. We're proving that we don't need your approval to survive. He finished his work and moved toward the exit, leaving Shalaxa huddled in her chair. By the way, you might want to check your personal financial accounts. I took the liberty of liquidating your investments in the military contractors who were betting against humanity. The proceeds have been donated to refugee assistance programs for species displaced by consortium peacekeeping operations. The hunt continued through the night cycle of the station. Marcus moved through his target list with methodical precision, visiting the private quarters and offices of every individual who had participated in the conspiracy. Trade Coordinator Vaxon found his personal communications filled with evidence of his illegal activities, automatically transmitted to law enforcement agencies throughout Korgan space. The Draxian representative discovered that his industrial contracts had been mysteriously rerouted to benefit human colonies instead of consortium interests. Each target received a personal visit from Marcus, during which they learned that their comfortable assumptions about human capabilities were dangerously outdated. By dawn, 14 high-ranking officials had been confronted with evidence of their crimes, had their personal assets either frozen or redirected, and had experienced firsthand what human adaptability looked like when applied to revenge. But Marcus saved the best for last. Kexthon, the heptarch who had been so enthusiastic about studying human psychology, had barricaded himself in the consortium's most secure conference room along with a squad of elite guards. The room was designed to be impregnable, with force fields that could stop military-grade weapons and communication systems that could summon reinforcements from across the galaxy. Marcus bypassed all of it by simply walking through the front door. Impossible, Kexthan breathed as Marcus entered the supposedly sealed chamber. The guards raised their weapons, but Marcus held up a hand showing a dead man's trigger. Gentlemen, I'm wearing enough explosives to turn this entire section of the station into rapidly expanding plasma. You might want to reconsider your tactical options. It was a bluff. Marcus wasn't actually carrying explosives. But the device he was holding was broadcasting false readings that convinced every sensor in the room that he was a walking bomb. Human ingenuity at its finest. You're insane, one of the guards said, his weapon wavering. Actually, I'm demonstrating human problem-solving methodology, Marcus replied casually. When faced with an impossible situation, we don't accept the limitations. We change the rules. Kexthon dismissed his guards with a gesture, apparently deciding that whatever Marcus wanted to discuss was preferable to being vaporized. When they were alone, Marcus deactivated his false readings and sat down across from the alien. You wanted to study human psychology, Marcus said. Consider this a field study. What have you learned? That we severely underestimated your species' capabilities, Kexthon admitted reluctantly. Good. Now, what else? The heptarch was quiet for a moment, his multiple eyes blinking in sequence as he processed the night's events. That perhaps our containment protocols were based on flawed assumptions. Better. And that attempting to manipulate humanity was unwise. Marcus smiled, and for the first time that night, it wasn't entirely predatory. Excellent. You're learning. Now, here's what's going to happen. You're going to use your influence in the consortium to ensure that all containment protocols against humanity are permanently rescinded. You're going to support full trade rights for human colonies. And you're going to make sure that the species currently betting against human survival lose their money. And if I refuse? Marcus pulled out his data device and showed Kexthon a holographic display. It showed the current locations of every member of the Heptarch's extended family, their daily routines, their security arrangements, and their vulnerabilities. Then I continue my education program, Marcus said simply. And trust me, I'm a very thorough teacher. Kexthon stared at the display for a long moment, his multiple eyes focusing and refocusing on different details. You've mapped every individual who participated in the conspiracy? Every individual, every family member, every associate, every asset. The galaxy wanted to study human psychology? They're about to learn that we don't just adapt to threats, we eliminate them. Completely. The Heptarch's skin had taken on a pale, sickly color. What you're describing is systematic persecution on a galactic scale. No, Marcus corrected, his voice suddenly hard as steel. What I'm describing is proportional response. You plan to eliminate human civilization. I'm planning to eliminate the individuals who made that decision. The only difference is that I'm giving you the chance to reconsider. Outside the conference room, Marcus could hear the sounds of the station slowly returning to normal operations. Security forces were containing the various incidents, emergency crews were repairing damaged systems, and diplomats were frantically trying to manage the political fallout from the night's revelations. But the real damage was only beginning. Across the galaxy, species that had trusted in consortium protection were demanding explanations. Independent worlds were reconsidering their relationships with the major powers. And in human space, Earth's defense forces were mobilizing with a new understanding of what they were truly facing. The galaxy had mocked the lone human, thinking him weak and isolated. They had underestimated not just Marcus Chen, but the entire species he represented. They had seen human adaptability as a weakness, rather than recognizing it for what it truly was, the ability to become whatever was necessary for survival. Marcus stood up from the conference table, looking down at Kexthon with something that might have been sympathy. You have 24 hours to begin implementing the changes I've outlined. After that, I stop being reasonable and start being creative. And trust me, you really don't want to see human creativity applied to the problem of your continued existence. As he walked toward the exit, Marcus paused at the doorway. Oh, and Kexthon? You might want to update your psychological studies. Humans don't just adapt to challenges. We overcome them permanently. The hunt had been successful beyond Marcus's wildest expectations. But as he made his way back through the chaos of the station, he knew that this was only the beginning. The galaxy had declared war on humanity, thinking they were crushing a primitive species. They were about to learn the difference between a primitive species and an apex predator that had just decided to stop pretending to be civilized. The emergency session of the Galactic Trade Consortium's High Council was unlike anything in the organization's 3,000-year history. Representatives from every major species sat in the vast chamber beneath the rotating hologram of galactic civilization, but instead of the usual atmosphere of dignified cooperation, the air crackled with fear, anger, and barely contained panic. Supreme Coordinator Zephak, an ancient Etherian whose species had founded the consortium, floated at the center of the chamber in a containment field filled with exotic gases. Her voice, translated through quantum resonance, carried the weight of millennia of experience. In 72 hours, a single human has systematically dismantled security protocols that have protected this organization for centuries, she announced. Her energy patterns fluctuating with what other Etherians would recognize as profound disbelief. He has exposed classified operations, eliminated operational security for 14 high-ranking officials, and somehow redistributed over 2 billion credits in assets without triggering a single automated detection system. Murmurs rippled through the assembly in dozens of languages. The Korgan military liaison, General Thorax, struck the arm of his chair with enough force to crack the reinforced material. With respect, Supreme Coordinator, these are the actions of a terrorist. We should respond with overwhelming force. The entire human delegation should be arrested, their ships impounded, and their species sanctioned until they surrender this criminal. An interesting perspective, said a new voice from the chamber's entrance. Though I think you might want to reconsider your tactical assessment. Every being in the chamber turned to see Marcus Chen walking calmly down the central aisle, flanked not by guards, but by what appeared to be an escort of honor from a dozen different species. Beings who had previously dismissed humanity were now treating him with unmistakable respect, and in some cases, obvious fear. Impossible, breathed Trade Coordinator Vaxon, who was sporting what looked like stress-induced molting across his exoskeleton. Security reported that you escaped the station. How are you here? Marcus smiled as he took a position at the speaker's podium, apparently uninvited but unchallenged. I never escaped, Coordinator. I simply finished my business and decided to attend this emergency session. After all, you're discussing me. Seems rude not to participate. Supreme Coordinator Zephak's energy patterns shifted to what Marcus had learned indicated intense curiosity. Commander Chen, you are accused of multiple criminal acts against consortium members. How do you answer these charges? I deny nothing, Marcus replied casually, though I would like to clarify the timeline. You see, everything I've done in the past 72 hours was in response to what I can only describe as a conspiracy to commit genocide against my species. He gestured, and holographic displays materialized throughout the chamber, showing the evidence he had gathered, the research papers, the betting pools, the military contracts, the systematic plan to eliminate human civilization. This is classified information, General Thorax roared, rising to his feet. How dare you? How dare I what? Marcus interrupted, his voice cutting through the general's bluster like a blade. How dare I defend my species against planned extermination? How dare I respond to threats with proportional force? Or how dare I demonstrate that humans aren't the primitive animals you thought we were? The chamber fell silent as representatives absorbed the implications of the evidence. Several species that had been comfortable in their consortium membership were clearly reconsidering their positions. The evidence is compelling, admitted scholarly Prime Vaxis of the Aldaran Collective, but the methods used to obtain it constitute unprecedented violations of galactic law. Marcus turned to face the scholar, his expression thoughtful. Prime Vaxis, your species has an interesting saying. When the law protects only the lawless, the righteous must become outlaws. I believe that applies here. You quote our philosophical traditions? Vaxis asked, clearly surprised. I've had an excellent education in galactic culture over the past few days, Marcus replied. Did you know that 17 different species in this room have historical precedents for exactly the kind of response I've implemented? The Korgan vengeance protocols, the Zalani honor wars, the Draxian corporate elimination campaigns. The difference is that humans are apparently much more efficient. General Thorax was glowing with barely contained rage. You compare your criminal acts to honored historical traditions? I compare my defensive actions to your species' own cultural practices, Marcus corrected. Though I admit, human methodology appears to be somewhat more comprehensive. He activated another display, this one showing a real-time galactic map. Red indicators pulsed throughout consortium space, marking what appeared to be simultaneous operations across dozens of systems. You see, while I was conducting my educational program here at the Nexus, my colleagues back on Earth were implementing what we call distributed problem solving. Every individual who participated in your conspiracy against humanity has been located, along with their assets, their associates, and their backup plans. The red indicators were pulsing faster now, and Marcus could see the growing horror on the faces of the assembled representatives as they realized the scale of what they were witnessing. "Impossible," whispered Trade Minister Shalaxa, her skin patterns cycling through colors Marcus had never seen before. The logistics alone would require what? A military organization capable of coordinating simultaneous operations across galactic distances, precisely the kind of capability that your research papers claimed humans lacked. Marcus gestured to the display. Each of these indicators represents a target neutralized, an asset seized, or a threat eliminated. We've had teams working around the clock for 3 days. Supreme Coordinator Zephak's energy patterns were fluctuating wildly. "Commander, what exactly are you saying?" "I'm saying that the conspiracy against humanity has been systematically eliminated. Every individual involved, every financial backing, every military asset, every backup plan. Gone." Marcus paused for effect. "Your psychological studies concluded that humans were too emotional and short-sighted for strategic planning. I thought you might benefit from a practical demonstration of how wrong that assessment was." The chamber erupted in chaos. Representatives were shouting in dozens of languages, demanding explanations, threatening retaliation, or in some cases, desperately trying to determine if their own assets had been compromised. But through it all, Marcus remained calm at the podium, waiting for the storm to exhaust itself. When order was finally restored, it was General Thorax who spoke first, his voice heavy with something that might have been respect. "You're claiming that humanity has conducted a coordinated military operation across multiple star systems in response to a perceived threat?" "Not perceived, General. Documented, and not a military operation. A police action. We identified criminals who were planning genocide and eliminated their capacity to carry out their plans." Marcus smiled coldly. "Though I suppose the distinction might be academic from your perspective." "This is an act of war," Vaxon stammered. "The consortium cannot allow—" "The consortium has already allowed it," Marcus interrupted. "It's done. The only question now is what happens next." He turned to address the full assembly, his voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. "For 3,000 years, you've built a civilization based on the principle that older species guide younger ones, that stability comes from careful control, that peace requires managed conflict. You've created a system where established powers eliminate potential rivals before they can become threats." The holographic displays changed again, now showing historical data. The rise and fall of dozens of civilizations over the millennia, each one following suspiciously similar patterns of initial integration, gradual restriction, managed decline, and eventual absorption. "Humanity isn't the first species you've targeted for elimination," Marcus continued. "We're just the first one to recognize the pattern and respond appropriately." "You're accusing the consortium of systematically destroying civilizations?" Supreme Coordinator Zephak asked, her energy patterns now showing what might have been genuine uncertainty. "I'm stating a demonstrable fact," Marcus replied. "Though I'm also offering a solution." The chamber fell silent again, all attention focused on the human at the podium. "The current system is predicated on the assumption that younger species will accept subordination in exchange for security. Humanity rejects that assumption. We're proposing an alternative." Marcus gestured, and the displays shifted once more, now showing detailed plans for what appeared to be a completely restructured galactic organization. A true cooperative system where species contribute according to their capabilities rather than their age, where security comes from mutual benefit rather than managed weakness, where advancement is achieved through innovation rather than elimination of competition. "And if we refuse?" General Thorax asked quietly. Marcus looked directly at the Korgan general. his expression devoid of emotion. Then you'll discover exactly how creative humans can be when we stop trying to fit into your system and start building our own. The threat was implicit, but unmistakable. Humanity had just demonstrated the ability to coordinate complex operations across galactic distances, penetrate supposedly impregnable security systems, and eliminate threats with surgical precision, if they chose to view the consortium itself as a threat. "You're holding the entire galactic community hostage," accused scholarly Prime Vaxis. "No," Marcus replied. "We're offering the entire galactic community a choice. Evolve or be replaced." Supreme Coordinator Zephak's energy patterns had stabilized into what Marcus hoped indicated deep consideration. "Commander Chen, what guarantees can you offer that humanity won't simply become the same kind of threat you've just eliminated?" Marcus was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke again, his voice had lost its edge, becoming something almost conversational. "Prime Coordinator, humans have a saying, power corrupts. We're not immune to that tendency, but we have something that your current system lacks. We remember being the underdogs. We know what it feels like to be dismissed, underestimated, and targeted for elimination." He gestured to the displays, which now showed the current aftermath of his operations. Assets redistributed to refugee relief programs, military contractors dissolved with their resources redirected to peaceful development, research programs refocused from species elimination to species cooperation. Every action we've taken has been designed not just to protect humanity, but to demonstrate an alternative approach. We didn't just eliminate threats, we turned them into benefits for the species that your system was failing to protect. The chamber was quiet now, with representatives clearly struggling to process the implications of what they had witnessed. "You want us to believe that humanity's revolution is altruistic?" General Thorax asked, though his tone was more curious than hostile. "I want you to recognize that humanity's revolution is inevitable," Marcus replied. "The question is whether it happens with your cooperation or over your objections." Trade Coordinator Vaxon, who had been quiet for several minutes, finally spoke up. "Commander, even if we accept your proposals, how do we know humanity won't simply impose its own version of control?" Marcus smiled, and for the first time since entering the chamber, it was genuinely pleasant. "Coordinator, that's the beauty of human psychology that your studies missed. We don't want to control the galaxy. We just want to make sure nobody else does either." The vote, when it finally came, was closer than Marcus had expected, but decisive enough to matter. The Galactic Trade Consortium would be restructured according to human proposals, with oversight from a council representing both established and emerging species. The containment protocols would be abolished. The betting pools would be terminated with proceeds distributed to species development programs, and most importantly, humanity would take its place as an equal partner in galactic civilization. As representatives filed out of the chamber, many of them stopping to speak quietly with Marcus, Supreme Coordinator Zephak approached the podium. "Commander Chen, I must ask, was this entire sequence of events planned from the beginning?" Marcus considered the question carefully. "Prime Coordinator, humans have another saying. No plan survives contact with the enemy. We came here hoping to negotiate trade agreements. Everything else was improvisation." "Improvisation," Zephak repeated, her energy patterns shifting to what Marcus was learning to recognize as amusement. "Your species' capacity for adaptation continues to surprise us." "With respect, Prime Coordinator, I think that's exactly the point. You've spent so long managing predictable species that you forgot how to deal with one that refuses to be managed." As Marcus left the chamber, he reflected on the events of the past few days. The galaxy had mocked the lone human, dismissing him as representative of a primitive species destined for extinction. They had underestimated not just his capabilities, but the fundamental nature of humanity itself. Humans weren't just another species seeking a place in galactic civilization. They were evolution in action, adaptation, innovation, and determination combined into something that refused to accept limitations imposed by others. The galaxy would never make the mistake of underestimating humanity again. And for the first time in millennia, galactic civilization would be shaped not by the careful control of ancient powers, but by the unlimited potential of species free to determine their own destiny. The lone human had been mocked, dismissed, and targeted for elimination. In response, he had hunted down his enemies, dismantled their conspiracy, and revolutionized galactic civilization. It was, Marcus thought as he made his way back to the human quarters, a fairly typical example of human problem-solving methodology. The galaxy was about to discover that humanity's story was just beginning.